I'm super excited today because I'm here with Bex Tasker from Positively Together, and she is a clicker training trainer of awesomeness who I'm just so thrilled to be able to work with. I have dabbled a little bit in the clicker training world and seen its superpowers just prior to turning D out actually, but literally dabbled. So I'm quite excited to sort of be able to do something more structured and interweave that into my training and have that inform it going forward. So hi Bex.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. Do you want to tell us, some people in the Joyride group at the moment I know are aware of and use clicker training. For some people it will be a completely alien concept. I don't even know if it's right to say clicker, or is it better to say positive reinforcement, or is this kind of a grey area of...
Semantics to some extent, isn't it? I mean, positive reinforcement essentially means that you are you're adding something in order to increase behaviour, in scientific terms. So that's what it means. So in other words, we're giving the horse something they want in order to get them to do what we want them to do.
Yeah.
So the reason that we call it clicker training is because often, not always, there's a marker signal. So it might be literally, I haven't got a clicker on me, but a clicker that makes like a sound, little plastic box basically.
Yeah.
Or I mean, with my horses, that's my sound.
Yeah.
Some people use the word yes, but the point is it's giving us a way of communicating really precisely to the animal what it is they've done that we're then going to reward.
Yeah.
So that's why people call it clicker training. So I call it clicker training for want of a better term, because it's common language. But
and that reinforcement cue, is it important that it's really consistent and the same one throughout the work that you do together?
Yeah, I mean, you can have multiple. I mean, my horses
they
will understand if I use a plastic clicker, and they also obviously understand my mouth click, what I call my tongue click, that noise. But I mean, essentially, you want it to be really salient. So in other words, like wow, 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 right? There's a lot of words coming out our mouths quite often when we're training and when we're talking to each other.
Yeah.
And what we want is a sound or a word that's really unique. So when they hear it, they really understand that it's that. So it pops out from all of the other guff that's going on in the background.
Yeah. And I suppose as well, like I'm just kind of fascinated by this whole process because on a neurological level, I work a lot with anchoring, and that is like creating a very specific trigger to elicit a specific emotional response. And so we're anchoring to the environment unbeknownst to us all the time. An example that I use is like when someone, you might be at a party and having a really amazing time and you hear a song come on, and then 10 years later that song can come on the radio and immediately you're taken back to that moment. So is that kind of a similar mechanics within the nervous system that clicker or that trigger creates over time?
I think that's a really interesting parallel because, absolutely. I mean, there's a conditioned emotional response to that sound.
Yeah.
So my young horse, who's very, I'd call him sensitive. Often it's a common occurrence for him to be in full flight mode. If I'm working him at liberty and something happens and he's racing off to the other side of the paddock with his tail up and snorting. He then turns to look at me and I click. He immediately goes from that sympathetic nervous system, that flight mode. I can see his face change. He's like, bam, and he's back with me. And his thinking brain is back on. And it's instant. And I've also heard stories of people using it not in the way it's intended, but if their horse is in a flat out bolt with them riding, they will click and the horse will turn the brakes on.
Wow.
Because it is such a deeply reinforced condition.
So, I wondered about that, when you are flipped over to that very adrenalized response and you're in that flight and fight mode, especially for animals where, like horses, where it's kind of black and white between the two zones, whether over time that response is strong enough to pull them out, which you're saying that it is. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, certainly, my horses have been trained this way since they were foals, but even horses that have had less time than that, hundreds and thousands, and in my case millions of repetitions of that sound means you get a reward, you get a dopamine rush, literally the chemicals in your body are changing, and you've got positive emotional associations with the person that is training you and with the environment and the whole thing. So yeah, it's incredibly powerful, and it
So cool. I've noticed positive reinforcement for me, and I suppose it's that filter system of once you start to kind of be aware of the ramifications and the implications for it within your own training, all of a sudden you start to notice lots of other people doing it. And even I've noticed some very high level Olympic trainers talk about it in tutorials and different things. So it's really something that I feel like, not to say that it's never been that, but it's becoming much more of a stronger force in the mainstream horse training world. And
I mean it's an absolute household term in dog training, and
that's right.
Best practice internationally with in zoos and marine parks, and has been for decades. We're getting rhinos to put their foot up on a thing and have their feet trimmed, and there's giraffes that are voluntarily submitting to blood draws, and like really, and wild animals submitting to having wounds debrided and stuff using exclusively hands-off positive reinforcement. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say the horse world's a little bit behind in terms of utilising this kind of technology alongside what we've been doing.
So, obviously your business is called Positively Together. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into it and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, I started out training dogs. So in my early 20s, I worked with guide dogs, and then I trained customs drug dog. And just before that, about the same sort of time, I discovered clicker training with my own dogs, and really it just spoke to my soul, I guess. It just really made sense. From an ethical, from a nice fluffy perspective, I love my animals and I want to treat them nicely, but really for me, I'm quite, I guess, analytical and scientifically minded, and I really like the fact that it's so logical, and it actually is based on decades of behavioural science, and it's absolutely, you can look around and it's happening in it's how we all learn, humans and animals and everything in every situation, whether we know it or not. Learning by consequences, it's all the same stuff. So I liked that I felt like it really unlocked the key as to why animals were behaving the way they were, and how I could therefore change their behaviour. So whether I'm teaching silly tricks to a dog or whether I'm teaching dressage to a horse, training is really about manipulating behaviour and consequences, right? And I really liked the clarity that it gave me, so that I could really understand how I could do that. And it was all very black and white and clear, and there was no kind of fluffy words. And I was able to go home and really implement that and make it happen. So that's what kind of appeals to me. Plus, it's incredibly effective, and it's really, really quick results. And the horses love it, and I love it. So I started out with dogs, and then when I got back into horses, because I've had horses all my life, but when I got back, I had a couple of years off, and we got back into horses and started implementing these like clicker training with my horses, which no one else, certainly that I know of in New Zealand, and few people at that point in kind of the world were doing. But I implemented some like VHS videos and books and clickers from the United States, and tried to do what I could with what there was online, which at that point was pre-Facebook and that kind of thing.
Pre-Facebook.
I know, right? Well, for me
Did
anyway.
that world exist?
We certainly weren't having online video calls.
No.
So I felt pretty alone in that, but at the same time it was fun, and I was just experimenting, and I learned the hard way, I guess, with my own horses, how to do things, because horses are very different creatures from dogs. And so, I mean,
why won't he sit? What
is that about? Things like really focusing on the calmness and the foundations of safety, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas with dogs, it really doesn't matter so much. If my 16-hand warm blood behaves the way that my hyper border collie does, then he's probably going to kill me.
Different result.
So there's different ways that we need to do things, and we need to focus on when we're clicker training horses versus dogs. So there was definitely, for me, there was a real learning process there. And I guess I learned all of that, so that now, whatever, 10, 15 years later, I'm teaching clinics really regularly, and I'm able to hopefully help people to learn from my mistakes, and they don't have to go through all those years of experimenting. And
so fascinating. So from I'm guessing that the same as in terms of, for want of a better term, negative reinforcement training perspective, where timing, pressure and release is everything. It would be the same working in a positively reinforced manner. So making sure that you're reinforcing not only in the moment, but the sequence prior to that moment, and then the timing of that kind of,
Good training is good training. And that's the underlying thing here, is that, you can look at, different names and different methods and different techniques and different, what we call quadrants of operant conditioning, so negative reinforcement being pressure and release, and positive reinforcement, or in other words, clicker training. I mean, but really they're just different ways that the animal learns, and they're all in play all the time. And so understanding how animals learn, which is, timing obviously is really key. And the power, as we all know, that, when we're training normally, traditionally, the release, the timing of that release is absolutely crucial. Similarly, of course, the timing of the click is absolutely crucial. And and if we were using both together, then of course you'd coincide the timing so that they